The Dow Jones Industrial Average has been in the news quite a bit lately, and not for the typical reasons we usually see.
It's been on its longest losing streak since 1974, which is a full 10 consecutive days of decline.
It is unusual to see, especially because just a few weeks ago, in early December, the Dow hit a record high.
Above 45,000 for the very first time.
So what is causing this downturn?
Particularly when other market indicators are still seemingly pretty strong.
Well, the last time this happened, Gerald Ford was president.
That's right.
What is driving this downturn when other indicators are still looking strong?
The Federal Reserve's recent policy announcements have played a significant role in all of this.
I see.
While they did cut interest rates, as expected, their projections suggest there will be fewer rate cuts in 2025 than previously anticipated.
So the market is reacting to the idea that monetary policy might stay tighter for a longer period of time than we expected.
Exactly. That has made some investors be a bit more cautious
Okay.
and contributed to this shift in market sentiment.
Got it. Is this impacting all sectors of the market equally, or are there specific areas feeling the effects more than others?
That's a great question. The Dow's structure itself is a contributing factor to its recent performance.
Okay.
Compared to broader indices like the S&P 500, the Dow underweights technology stocks and is heavily weighted toward what we call old economy stocks.
So are we seeing a little bit of a sector rotation happening here with investors moving away from those old economy stocks and more into tech?
Precisely, and this rotation amplifies the Dow's decline.
Are there any specific companies within the Dow that are having an outsized effect on the index's losses?
There are a couple of key players. United Health Group, for example, experienced a significant decline earlier this month, which had a ripple effect on the Dow.
Interesting. Well, what about NVIDIA? I know it was a somewhat recent addition to the Dow. Has that impacted things?
It has. NVIDIA has seen some losses in the past month as well, which has further contributed to the Dow's slide. It's interesting because its inclusion in the Dow was actually intended to increase the index's exposure to the technology sector.
So even with the Dow being down, the broader market isn't necessarily showing the same weakness.
That's an important point.
Both the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ were near record highs before Wednesday's plunge.
This divergence highlights why it's important to look beyond a single index when gauging the overall health of the market. It suggests that this might be a sector-specific issue rather than a sign of widespread market weakness.
That makes sense. So it seems like while the Dow's performance is definitely grabbing headlines,
Right.
the situation is more nuanced than it first appears.
I would agree. It will be interesting to see if this trend continues and how it might impact the Dow's composition going forward.
Yeah.
We could see some adjustments to better reflect the changing market landscape. The recent decline in United Health Group is a fascinating case study.
It really is.
It demonstrates how non-economic factors can significantly impact market performance. The unexpected death of CEO Brian Thompson sent shockwaves through the company,
Absolutely.
and the market reacted accordingly.
It's a reminder that well-established companies can be vulnerable to unforeseen events.
Absolutely.
Investors are always looking for stability.
Yes,
A sudden change in leadership can raise concerns.
absolutely. And it's not just about leadership changes.
Right.
Geopolitical events, natural disasters, and new regulations can all introduce uncertainty into the market
I see.
and trigger shifts in investor behavior.
Speaking of investor behavior, we've been talking about this rotation out of old economy stocks and into tech.
Yes.
What is driving that trend?
There are a number of factors.
Okay.
Technological advancements are a major driver. We're seeing rapid innovation in areas like artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and electric vehicles.
Interesting.
These advancements are creating new opportunities for growth, and investors are naturally drawn to those opportunities.
It seems like the digital economy is just growing exponentially, and that's where investors are seeing the most potential.
Exactly. And the pandemic accelerated this trend. It forced businesses to adapt to a more digital world, and consumers became more comfortable with online shopping and digital services.
That's true.
This shift has created a whole new landscape for businesses, and investors are taking notice.
So it's not just about the technology itself.
Right.
It's about the changing behavior of consumers and businesses as well.
Precisely. And this brings us back to the Dow's composition,
Okay.
because it's heavily weighted toward those traditional industries.
I see.
It's not as well positioned to capture the growth in these newer sectors.
That makes sense. So is this rotation out of old economy stocks likely to continue?
It's hard to say for sure, but the underlying trends suggest that it could.
Okay.
The digital economy is still in its early stages of development,
Right.
and there's a lot of room for growth.
I see.
As long as investors continue to see more potential in tech and innovation compared to more traditional industries, this trend is likely to persist.
This brings up a really interesting question about the future of the Dow.
It does.
If this trend continues, could we see some changes to its composition to better reflect the changing market landscape?
That's certainly a possibility.
Okay.
The Dow has undergone changes in the past to remain relevant and representative of the broader market.
Right.
It's conceivable that we could see some adjustments to include companies that are better aligned with the current growth sectors.
It will be fascinating to see how that unfolds.
I agree.
The Dow is often seen as a bellwether of the American economy.
It is.
So any changes to its composition could signal a broader shift in the economic landscape.
Exactly.
So while the Dow is experiencing this historic losing streak,
Yes.
there's a lot more going on beneath the surface.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that the stock market is a complex system influenced by a wide range of factors.
Right.
Focusing solely on the Dow's performance can give us a skewed perspective.
We need to consider the broader market context, the Fed's actions, and the underlying trends shaping the economy.
Exactly. And it's important for investors to do their research,
Yeah.
understand their own risk tolerance,
Okay.
and make informed decisions based on the long-term outlook rather than reacting to short-term market fluctuations.
Solid advice. So while the Dow's performance might be grabbing headlines, it's important to keep things in perspective.
Absolutely.
It's interesting to think about how this extended losing streak might be perceived by the average person.
It is.
Does it signal broader economic concerns,
That's what a lot of people are asking.
even though other indicators are remaining strong?
The Dow is often seen as a barometer of the overall economy, but as we've been talking about, it's important to remember that it represents a very small slice of the market.
So it's possible for the Dow to be down while the rest of the economy is doing pretty well.
Yes, the Dow's composition being heavily skewed toward those old economy stocks, which, as we've said, aren't necessarily reflecting the areas of the economy that are currently experiencing the most growth.
So this losing streak could be more of a reflection of the Dow's structure than a sign of a broader economic downturn,
That's a very plausible interpretation.
especially since other indices like the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ have been performing very well.
Right. It suggests that the overall market sentiment is still relatively positive.
It's also worth noting that even with this 10-day decline, the Dow is still up significantly for the year.
You're right.
Over 14%, in fact. That's over 5,000 points.
That's right. It's important to keep the bigger picture in mind.
Okay.
The stock market is inherently cyclical.
I see.
Periods of decline are a natural part of the process.
So rather than panicking, investors should focus on their long-term goals and maintain a diversified portfolio.
I would completely agree with that assessment. It's easy to get caught up in the headlines and make emotional decisions, but history has shown time and time again that the market tends to reward patience and a disciplined approach to investing.
This has been a really insightful conversation. I feel like I have a much better understanding of what's driving the Dow's performance and what it means for the broader market.
Well, I'm glad to hear that it's always fascinating to explore these market dynamics and consider the various factors that shape the economic landscape.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.